Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first workshop of the new year with the Nonprofit Resource Hub, Board Development and Action Planning, presented by Christine Deska. We are really very excited to have you here. Christine is the president and co-founder of Bell's Board and the Nonprofit Sector Strategies. And she has really put together a great presentation today and has given you time to ask questions in the chat later on after her presentation is over. My name is Allison LaFerlita. I am the executive director for the Nonprofit Resource Hub, and we have a lot of people signed up today. So we're thrilled to have you here. This is really an important topic. I'm sure that many of you are looking forward to getting the information from Christina. Before we start, I do want to invite all of you that are nonprofit organizations to join the Nonprofit Resource Hub. It is an organization that has been really created to help you, support you. It does not cost you as a nonprofit anything to join. So if you are not yet a nonprofit partner with us, I would encourage you to do so. You have access to great workshops like this, among many, many other support services. So please do make sure that you join after today's workshop. So I am going to start and introduce Christine without further ado and give her time and then give you time to ask your questions at the end of the presentation. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much, Allison. I appreciate the intro. Shall I dig in?
Go for it.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. As Allison said, we did get a tremendous response to this topic, which makes me happy because one of the things we strive to do with both Bell's Board and nonprofit sector strategies is help nonprofits prioritize good governance practices. So I hope you can all see my screen here. I think you can maybe still see me if you're depending on your view, but I typically like to start with a power pose to get us all up and moving. So if you want to hold your arms up and get out of your Zoom land that you've been in all day, I really appreciate you making the time to join for this important topic. And so, as Allison said, I'm the president and co-founder of Bell's Board and Nonprofit Sector Strategies. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background as to kind of how this topic came about for us. And so we do a lot of strategic planning at Nonprofit Sector Strategies, where we take organizations through that entire process. And we kept coming back to this pain point of, but I wish my board did this. I wish my board did that. How could we get to this stage with our board? What strategy should we engage in specifically related to our board of directors? And so we developed something that we call board development action planning, where we typically spend 6 months with an organization and meet monthly and have different touch points along the way. And so this is kind of some insight into that approach. And I really hope that each of you who have made the time to spend with me, with the Nonprofit Resource Hub today, come away with a couple little nuggets, a couple little takeaways at least that you could use to make your board more efficient, more effective, more connected. And ultimately, that makes your organization more sustainable. If you have access to the chat, I hope you do. I encourage you to put your information in, not just for me. We'll follow up, by the way, after this tomorrow with a checklist. So a really great piece of collateral for you to have and use on your own with your organization. We'll be in touch, but why not be in touch with one another? So add your information into the chat, and maybe there's an organization who's also attending right now who you could partner with, who you haven't heard about, who also is tackling similar governance challenges. So I encourage you to do that in the chat, as well as adding in your questions. As they come to mind, please add them. My goal is to finish my overview, this approach, which I've kind of boiled down into 5 steps by 12:30. That way you have plenty of time to get your questions answered in live time if you have them. So get those into the chat. My colleague Kelly, who the NRH wouldn't function without, just told me that the average attention span used to be 2.5 minutes a while ago, and now it's 47 seconds. So there's a chance some of you are multitasking already, but I encourage you to listen to for the next 15 minutes at least, because the 5 steps will hopefully resonate and give you some really great takeaways to help your organization moving forward. I wanted to emphasize here that, the general approach is what I said, a 6-month process. If you try to tackle anything all at once in any aspect of your life, chances are it will not take shape. So, just try to tackle one approach at a time if you can. That way your board will improve just based on some of the things that are brought to your attention today. And then I wanted to emphasize that a shared responsibility is no responsibility. While, of course, an entire leadership team should be working together with the board of directors on many things, or at least a subset of that board of directors, if there's not a point person to spearhead something forward, oftentimes it will not move forward. And I'll emphasize this again going forward. This is kind of basic planning and strategy work, right? But it's hard to kind of prioritize this on top of all of the other mission-driven work that you're focused on. So let's jump in. So like I said, it'll be 5 steps. We'll really dig in. So if you're thinking about how to revitalize your board, or if you're finishing the sentence, if only my board could, if only my board would, just to kind of get your mind going. But where do you really want to start when it comes to, improving your board engagement, improving your board makeup? It should all start with your overall strategic goals. Of course, like I said, we do a lot of strategic planning, so it all really should tie into this. So if you're listening right now and you don't have an active strategic plan, I would encourage you to do at least a bare bones approach to that so that you can kind of think through, where do you see your organization in the next 1 to 3 years, right? Where do you see growth happening? Where is there the potential to grow, and how? What partnerships do you need to forge in order to foster growth? In terms of resource development, how financially healthy are you? What areas are there potential to increase your funding? What's untapped? What are you doing well? What can you capitalize on? So once you have these goals in mind, then it becomes easier to then back into, okay, so what type of board do I need to support this? And lastly, that bullet at the bottom is that buy-in and commitment from leadership. It really is essential. You kind of need that cheerleader, that respected leader at the forefront, whether it's a board chair, whether it's a strong committee chair, whether it's a founder, executive director, your CEO, to really know that good governance practices and a strong board of directors is essential. All right, so step 2, let's start by asking some of the right questions. So once your strategic goals are identified, what kind of board do you need to achieve your strategic goals, right? This isn't kind of, oh, we probably should have this type of board member. Well, hopefully that type of board member that you're thinking of that person because by having them as an asset on your board will lead you to achieve those strategic goals at a more rapid rate, at a more effective rate, things of that nature. So if you're thinking you want to have a bigger board, do we need more members? Okay, but why? There should always be a reasoning behind that ties back to your goals. Do we need to re-engage our existing members, right? Do you have a group of members that could be doing more, that have value to add, that are just not delivering? Oftentimes when we meet with organizations, we hear, okay, we have this cadre of board members, the old guard, we have our new folks, we have the ones in the middle, and every group tends to be at a different stage of engagement. So is this an opportunity to get everyone on the same page? And then lastly, is there a group or a member that you need to prepare for an exit strategy of some kind? And how can you do that in a way that does not damage the overall dynamic of your board, right? Is there an advisory board you could push off to? Is there a term ending that makes this sort of process smoother? It's always touchy. This is people management, right? All around. I think the reason why nonprofits often struggle with effective board engagement and good governance is because does every nonprofit have a full HR department to manage and onboard and do all of the things that larger companies do with their employees? And they still have stumbling blocks. So of course, most nonprofits are probably right where you are, feeling like you can't keep up There's so much more you want to do. There's more that you could be leveraging with your current board members, but it's really difficult to find that capacity. So I hope that these 5 steps give you some ideas as to the little things that you could do that could make a big difference without getting completely overwhelmed. So step 3, a board assessment. Now, not your traditional board assessment is what I'm referring to here. I'm sure many of you have embarked on sort of a traditional board assessment. I like the Adelphi Center for Nonprofit Leadership. I actually have this open kind of on my background. And that's where you typically look at things like the board has a full and common understanding of the roles and responsibilities. Board members understand the organization's mission, et cetera, and evaluating your structure. That is a very important tactic to consider. But what I'm really referring to here is a more broad sort of view of your board and asking some really important questions as a leadership team to really think about where can we grow, where can we improve, all tying us back to our strategic goals. So some of those important questions: is our board representative of the communities we serve? Oftentimes, now we're all delving into the importance of prioritizing diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. So based on the communities that we serve, do we also have board representation that is in alignment with that? If not, how can we do targeted recruitment to get there? So we'll talk about that more in a minute. Do we foster a sense of belonging? One of my favorite CEOs that we work with, he says, and I should probably start giving him credit for this quote, but since I didn't ask his permission, I will just say, he likes to say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I mention that because, the culture of your organization is so important. And there's also a certain culture that your board of directors has. And so when you bring new folks in, or just for the folks who are continuing to serve, are you fostering that sense of belonging, that sense of inclusivity that you really need in order to have your members feeling connected to your organization? Because remember, there's a lot of other nonprofits out there vying for talented board members. And so we shouldn't take the good folks that we have on our boards for granted. And that culture that we create is a big reason why they stay or go. We can reflect on where we have found our past members and where we might want to look going forward. Sometimes this results in successful, engaged board members, and sometimes this results in someone kind of checking a box and then not being involved in how could we have prevented that. Along the same lines, what kind of vetting process do we have in place? Do we need to kind of revisit how we bring members through our interview process? What does that look like? It could be informal or formal, depending on your size and needs. And your onboarding process. Is there one in place? It could be very, very basic, bare bones, but there should be some sort of definitive way that new members come on board, some sort of informal or formal orientation to again, feel part of something and feel connected to your organization and its mission. The next one, do we connect our members to board education? This is everywhere these days. So many of my wonderful partner companies like Serini and Associates, another founding member of the NRH, is constantly pushing out free webinars, free information like what the NRH is doing today with this deck. There's a lot of great information out there. Could we be letting our board members know? Here's how you can learn more about your roles and responsibilities. This will really help the members who have served for a while, but really haven't been in tune with, oh, I actually have a real and important fiscal responsibility to this organization, and I have more to learn. We all have more to learn. So this is a constant education process that I think board members appreciate being made aware of. The next 2 questions. Do we make it easy for members to access their governance information? Bell's board is a board portal, but there are many other ways to centralize your information. The fact is, right now, we are all so stretched whether it's balancing family. I happen to have a 5-year-old with a stomach bug around the corner. I'm listening with one ear to see if, is she okay today? She's not in school. We're all so stretched. So are we making it easy for our board members to efficiently grab their information before that meeting, right? Centralize that information in whatever way works for your group, because then your board members will know where to look for their agenda. They'll be more likely to review their minutes before the meeting, etc. And lastly, and probably more important than anything we do in life, is, are we communicating our expectations effectively? When we bring on new members, we should let them know what we expect, and they can let us know what they expect, and then you see if you're a good fit. Consistent, good communication is really essential, or there's bound to be a breakdown. I think we're all probably addressing those breakdowns all the time in different parts of our life, because it is a lot of work, right, to keep that open line of communication and keep that relationship healthy. Step 4 of 5. All right, craft an action plan. That's what we're here to really delve into today. So, based on some of the things that might be going through your head, kind of thinking through those questions as they relate to your organization. Some of you have probably implemented some of these tactics. You've gone down some of these roads in the past. Some have probably benefited your organization greatly. Others you thought, oh, if I had approached it differently, it would have been effective, and you kind of learn as you go. I think that's pretty much what many nonprofits are experiencing, because there is so much that you can do when it comes to good governance practices. So I suggest just taking one bite of the cookie at a time. And all of this can actually form what we call, your board development roadmap, really a way of plotting out what you need for your organization over time. Not doing all of these things in one quarter or even 1 year, but over the course of 3 years. Could you consider some of these tactics? So I mentioned the central location for your information. If your information is flying everywhere at your board members, and I have served on a board where I'll get 12 different emails of all the attachments leading up to the meeting. It is very challenging and overwhelming to be prepared for a meeting when you're kind of looking everywhere, constantly getting an updated document and not really knowing what to read ahead of the meeting. Board members, usually successful professionals that they are busy. And so if you can create an organized place for them to go, they'll be more likely to be happy with the way that they're getting their information and be prepared. The next one I wanted to mention is a self-assessment. You can do this completely in-house, or you can do it with the help of a consultant, or you can do it by just bringing in someone from perhaps a different department with a different perspective to kind of spearhead it. But essentially, a self-assessment is exactly what it sounds like. It's a nice way to let board members reflect on their participation. Perhaps someone came into your organization and maybe they work at a big bank, and they came in promising that they could get certain donations because of connections that they have, or in kind, donations like space for an event. But over time, maybe those things have fallen by the wayside. Well, self-assessment is a great way to kind of remind that board member, who probably has very good intentions, that they came to the table with certain connections or partnership opportunities that maybe haven't come to fruition. But during that self-assessment process, they can reflect on how they've really participated, how they've contributed to your organization so far. And it gives them the opportunity to kind of recommit, re-engage, and then you can kind of discuss this in a really positive way as a group. It's really nice to come out of a self-assessment process and say, wow, 60% of all of you who participated all said that you would like to use more of your skill sets to better this organization, to help us further our mission. And isn't that a wonderful thing, right? There's so many different skill sets out there that can benefit a nonprofit's growth. When it comes to real estate, for example, what if your organization is looking at different space, or looking at starting a respite house, or looking at a space for youth programming, and you have someone who happens to know all of the ins and outs of commercial real estate who can point you to potential there. Or people who are familiar with the architectural process in building, right? It could be so many different areas of expertise, but it really depends on where your organization is going with its goals in terms of what types of expertise you want to seek out. I'm actually going to jump to the board matrix facilitated discussion because of what we were just talking about. So some of you may have delved into this in the past. This is essentially when you're looking at a grid and matrix and you're literally listing out all of the different categories and types of board members that you have. But a really nice way to approach this that is often not done, I would say, is to let your board members also be part of that initially and self-identify. You may not know that someone who is that banker also has a great relationship with a professional sports team who could bring in folks to support your organization. Or you may not know that someone who has spent their career also in the charitable world has connections with a company who could sponsor your annual event. You know, you don't know necessarily where the strengths lie of your board members, but if you're asking them to self-identify, you will probably uncover really interesting attributes. And it's really nice to make this a bit more broad when you approach it, because you're also looking for a difference in leadership styles among your board members. You're looking for diversity among cultural representation, among ability representation, among geographic, perhaps, right? If your organization is looking to replicate a program in a different geographical area, perhaps you want a member with connections in that metropolitan area. So there's so many different ways to approach the matrix and what makes sense for your organization. But by doing this and making the time, once throughout the year, once every 2 to 3 years, to really look at where are the gaps, this is the most effective way to approach recruitment. Not just open-ended, not just someone with resources. Of course, that can be very important, but that's really not the be-all, end-all. And by approaching it in a more targeted, strategic manner, you will really feel rewarded, and your organization will get the immediate benefit of plugging in a board member based on the value that they come to the table with, because it will really be in alignment with your strategic priorities. So I can't emphasize enough how worthwhile it is to consider a board matrix discussion if you haven't before. You could do the exercise with a small team at first to try to really map out where you are as an organization and where you want to be, and then open it up from there to your board at large. So I skipped over the traditional board assessment piece. That's kind of what I was giving you an example of from the Adelphi site, and I will share that along with the checklist tomorrow. It's very helpful to also do that assessment on the other end, right? You have your self-assessment, and then you have the leadership team really looking at the board. It's a nice kind of two-way, it's almost that 360 kind of approach. Like any employee, might have the opportunity to be reviewed, but to also review their boss. It's very beneficial. So when I share that, maybe take a look. If you haven't approached the traditional assessment in that manner, it could definitely help uncover some of where you want to spend time going forward, and some, a place you might want to kind of hold for your roadmap, right? If we've never looked at our committee structure, that's the bullet I have here under this. If we've never really evaluated the effectiveness of our committee structure, that could be something you want to put on your agenda for this year for your governance practices.
Christine, I don't mean to interrupt you, but there have been some questions about a sample of the matrix.
Oh, great. Thanks, Allison. So the Adelphi Center for Nonprofit Leadership, who I love to talk about, they also have a great board matrix template on their site. So I can hyperlink to that in the checklist that we share tomorrow as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Any other questions that are coming in that I should take?
Let's see. Nope, not just the
Okay.
matrix.
Okay. I know it's hard to hear one voice for this long, going back to Kelly's point about attention. So thank you for interrupting me. Much appreciated.
Sure. If
Yeah,
I do see questions as we go through that are relevant to that slide or to what you're talking about, I will just raise my hand.
great. Well, I can't see you, so just pipe in.
Oh, well, then you'll hear me talk.
Thanks, Allison. So we'll hyperlink to those two resources, the traditional assessment, a self-assessment actually, and a board matrix. They're all great templates to build from. And it's great to be able to spearhead it on your own. And then you can look to a consultant to help support that effort if needed. But a lot of this can be done in-house if you really prioritize it. So the last three bullets I want to address on this slide, new recruitment strategies. This is a big one. So especially when it comes to diversifying your board and whatever that really means for you. I had the honor of sitting on a panel next to a fantastic DEI consultant named Amma Carey-Yawson. And I just want to call that out. It's on our NRH website as well. But Amma specifically works on board diversification. And a really big takeaway that I had from hearing her suggestions was, just as an example, she's an Ivy League grad of the Wharton School, just as an example. And they have literally a body at Wharton dedicated to placing highly qualified, of course, board members at nonprofit organizations. There's literally a point person at the Wharton School that would help a nonprofit that reached out in this regard. And, Amma made the point that this, of course, exists at other institutions beyond Wharton and many in this metropolitan area, for those of you who are also in the New York area now. So there are ways to really think outside the box to attract different types of board members that maybe your organization had not included in the past. But just keep in mind that if you are seeking to recruit a different type of board member, a new group of board members, because you're at this pivotal point of growth or changing direction, be cognizant of how your board culture is as well, right? Be cognizant of how you help a new board member feel that they belong, feel that they feel included, right? So one best practice there, we talked a bit about onboarding strategies briefly before, or an orientation. You could set up a new board member with a board buddy, someone they have to turn to if they have a question, so that they don't feel like they're pulling in the ED or CEO or board chair away from their, important day-to-day, and they have a board buddy to lean on. That team building aspect, especially if your organization is going through a pivotal point of change, is really vital to make that culture positive and the environment kind of feel like they're part of something, right? Especially if you've had many of the same boards on end. A board retreat that I have listed here is a really lovely way to bring folks together. It doubles as a team building event and really brings board members to the table to reflect on, are they well versed in your mission after all these years? How connected do they feel to the organization, to one another, to their roles? This is a great educational opportunity. So if you have the time to spend a half day or even 3 hours together as a board that is separate from your meetings, that is very important. I had organizations say, well, our retreat in the past didn't go so well because we launched it following a very intense board discussion at a meeting. And I said, wait, no. The retreat should be something very separate from your quarterly meetings. And I know that can be hard to build in the time for another gathering, but even if you do it every other year, I would suggest doing it annually. Your board members will feel, that sense of connection and be revitalized to give, revitalized to participate. And now that we're in this post-pandemic world, in person is now an option for many organizations. And you can even do a hybrid setup, but it really does break up the monotony of let's review the minutes, what's our standard agenda, to have that separate retreat gathering. Lastly, board education. I really can't stress it enough. I could talk for way longer than you would be interested in hearing about all of the different roles and responsibilities and compliance aspects we haven't even delved into here. All of the things that nonprofits are expected to stay on top of, it really is unwieldy. So I just encourage you to tap into the free resources I was mentioning earlier, that my colleagues at Serini and Associates offer year-round, just board trainings, 3 parts, webinars. It's all recorded, it's out there, it's available. And so why not encourage your board members to take part? And why not let them know that you're helping support their educational pathway as a board member? So last step, in step 5, a roadmap is essential. So I hope that a lot of these best practices that I'm emphasizing are pretty straightforward, things you may have heard of in the past but haven't had a chance to take advantage of for one reason or another. But again, if you try to do everything at once, chances are nothing will happen. But if you set out to develop a roadmap, if you can identify a point person to be the one that will say, wait a minute, we're in quarter 2. Did we do X, Y, Z? That's really, really important. I always go back to my cousin with her 4 kids, and she says she doesn't leave them anywhere without one point person. Because if there's not one point of responsibility, one of those kids might go missing because you get distracted. So similarly with any roadmap, whether it's your strategic planning roadmap or this one focused on board development, make sure the buck stops with one person. That doesn't mean they're doing everything, but that means that they have their finger on the pulse of progress. So this roadmap should literally be a month by month or quarter by quarter, just map for the next, I would say, 2 years, where you just put little markers in. Every January, we should be signing off on our conflict of interest disclosure. Every November, we will make the time for our board retreat. Whatever rhythm could really work for your organization. Maybe this June, you plan to do your first self-assessment based on the template that we'll share tomorrow, and see what information you can gather and just make sure you're prepared to really respond to some of the takeaways that board members share with any of these tactics. So that's why I stress not to take on too much at once, but really to make a plan together as a team. And then you're more likely to follow through on that action plan. So lastly, that central location to track your progress will help keep you on track. Metrics can be more challenging with a roadmap like this or with an action plan like this. But wherever you can set those metrics, if there's a certain number of board members you're looking to attract and add to your group, mark that down. Mark that down as your goal for the next fiscal year, right? If there's an important skill set you're looking to bring on, or a type of leadership style, or a contact in an industry that you currently don't have represented on your board, put that goal down on paper within your roadmap. And even if June comes and goes and you're unable to attract that particular skill set or board member, that goal will live on, right? It will still be there. It'll be part of your roadmap, and you'll be more likely to strategically be recruiting rather than kind of getting lost in, just throwing your hands up in the air and saying, we need more board members. Where will we find them? We hear this all the time. So let me, in closing, so we have time for questions. My commitment to you, as we've mentioned, will be to share this board development checklist with you tomorrow, reinforcing some of the tactics and approaches that we've been talking about over the past 20 minutes, along with the hyperlinks to those resources like the Adelphi Institute for Nonprofit Leadership and others. And so now I hope
Christine, I'm so sorry. There is a question about step 5.
Yes.
Did you mention it? Or
no.
do you? Okay, so there is no step 5. The question, I'm sorry, just came in as step 5 question mark. So I'm not sure exactly.
Oh.
All right. I think it was found. We're good.
Thank you for
Okay.
asking. So step 5 would be to not take all of this or not evaluate all of this without digging into a roadmap, without getting your roadmap on paper. So that's step 5. Hopefully I didn't miscount and throw everybody off in any way.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. So now I'd like to open it up for any questions, and my email address is on the next slide, and you'll get that checklist tomorrow as well if you don't have any top of mind. So Allison, do we have any questions?
I was just kind of taking notes as you were presenting, and I'm going to allow everybody a moment or two to put their questions in. But the kind of my takeaway from it was when you're creating your plan, it's really important kind of to front load it with clear communication and setting expectations. This is what cultivates these healthier relationships. And as a career executive director, I've learned many times that the clearer your expectations are, the smoother everything goes. So, what I was hearing from you is that when you are starting your plan, you really need to kind of be clear with what your expectations are from your board members. And also, I'm thinking just based on you were saying something else about how everybody comes on with good intentions and says that they can do this and that for you, maybe putting that in writing. So when they do their self-assessment, that they can go back and say, oh, I did, I did offer that. I can still do that for you. I would be happy to do that. But we do have a couple questions, and I don't want to take away from the crowd. So let me go up here. Okay, so as an FQHC, my board needs to be 51% from the communities we serve and utilize the health centers. This means we do not have a strong financially contributing board. How do you feel about having a fundraising committee with outside of board members, fundraising advisory members?
I think there can be a huge asset in bringing outside folks in to serve in a fundraising capacity. You do need to be aware of what's stated in your organization's bylaws, though as it relates to external folks, some bylaws allow for external folks to serve on certain types of committees and some do not. So I will just kind of I should preface everything with what I'm saying is whenever we do a board development action plan, we always make sure there's a legal resource for an organization to turn to, whether that's a pro bono resource or a trusted legal counsel, just to make sure that you don't make any missteps along those lines. Regarding fundraising overall, this is a common challenge, right? You're trying to balance representation with resources. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it really comes back to that strategic recruitment approach and really thinking through where those gaps are and what your fundraising goals are. So it's certainly more challenging given what was described in the question, but not impossible, if the time is really put in to strategize and plan and work towards those goals. So I'd be happy to talk to whoever asked that question. Reach out, with an email so we can kind of dig in more, because this is a common challenge when it comes to that balance.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any other questions coming in for Christine?
Well, Allison, while you wait to see if anyone's writing, I did want to reflect on what you had shared, and that is, conveying expectations in written form, whatever that might be, is really important. Whether it's asking your board members to look at a checklist for the year going forward, here is what is expected of you. Literally listing out your core events throughout the year. We would appreciate your participation in the following. We would appreciate you giving a personally significant financial contribution to the organization. Keeping it vague. That's different for everyone, but that 100% participation in terms of giving is really important. So whether it's a checklist asking your board to commit for the year going forward, or it's at the end of the year saying, look, everyone, we appreciate your service. Let's reflect on what we were able to do this year, and literally asking members to sit with themselves. Some organizations have these these forms collected. That's a different sort of level of responsibility or accountability. But either way, it kind of gets that conversation going. And generally, board members who are there with really good intentions and meant to give, but just didn't remember to mail that check in or go online and donate, or meant to, put a save the date on their calendar for that golf outing, but forgot, are more likely to then be more engaged and follow through on those things. So, Allison, I appreciate you saying that. It really is at the core communication and conveying expectations in an effective way.
Sure, thank you. We do have another question. We have actually a couple more questions. Before I ask this one, somebody's just asking if you could go back to the slide where step 5 was mentioned, just so they could take a look at it. And then the other question is, should each board member be required to join one board committee?
Great question. I love when people ask questions of things that make me think, I forgot to say that. A great engagement tactic is absolutely asking members to join a committee upon joining the board, or if you're re-energizing your structure, to go out to your board members. I think without that additional participation on a committee, members are much more likely to be disengaged and not in step with the organization's progress. So thank you for asking that question. I know it's not always possible if you're just kind of formalizing your structure and maybe there aren't enough committees to choose from, but hopefully over time, the basic structure, you would want to have a nominating committee, right, to help with vetting new folks. Of course, finance or audit. Of course, fundraising, right, to really have board members connected to that progress and where your organization is going. So those are just some committees that you would want to have in place, and absolutely asking board members or even requiring that they participate in at least one committee is a great practice.
Well, and Christine, if you don't mind my actually piggybacking onto that, I think as an executive director, it's really important to have a board member even spearheading a committee, because when you go to your board meetings, you have now not only the executive director, but a board member representative that can help communicate with the board what is happening within that community, in that committee, and how, whatever the approach may be that you're taking. This way, the board is getting 2 different perspectives. So yes, when you need to make a decision or have a discussion, it's not wasting time for the executive director to say, well, wait, now I'm going to go back to committee, because you'll have a board member there, representative, to help discuss that topic. Yes, let's see what else we have. Okay, we don't have any other questions at this moment. But thank you for letting me share my 2 cents on committees.
Your 2 cents is always helpful. Any way you can create more ownership among your board members of progress, unless you're worried about someone overstepping, which is a whole other people dynamic or a facet of people dynamics that we can delve into, because it's all about people and relationships. It's a positive thing to create more ownership among your committee chairs, especially. So, think about ways that there's that underutilized board member, someone you want to work more with, or someone who's been asking to do more, see what could be a good fit for them. It's worth having those conversations.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. We do not have any other questions at this time.
Then let's give everyone an extra 14 minutes in their day. I love when meetings end early. I don't know about you all, when we're all in Zoom land all day. So we will follow up with the checklist and the other resources. And please, shoot me an email here if you think of something after the fact. I really appreciate everyone's time. And as Allison said, if you're not a member of the NRH, it is free to join for nonprofits. I'm honored to serve as the president right now of NRH. And it's a really, really great resource. So I hope that if this is one of your first webinars, that you consider attending more in the future, because we have an incredible roster of associate members that are really committed to the nonprofit space. And so we hope that, you found this helpful.
And Christine, thank you for your time and for sharing your skills and your wisdom with us and your knowledge. And, Christine can do a much deeper dive with you if you want to call her outside of this workshop today. She offers tremendous services to the nonprofit community. So please take a look. And yes, please do join the Nonprofit Resource Hub. We are here for you. This is a no-brainer if you're a nonprofit organization. It is tremendous what we provide to this community, and it would be a shame if you weren't taking advantage of it. So thank you again, Christine, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.